Okay, we should be starting in a couple of minutes.
Oh my.
Ξεκινάμε σε ένα λεπτό, Κωνσταντίνε.
Είμαστε έτοιμοι.
Ωραία. So, dear colleagues in Cyprus and overseas, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 56th public lecture series of the Archaeological Research Unit of the University of Cyprus. Following last semester's lecture series given by all members of the academic staff, the 56th series this semester continues our virtual celebrations of the first 30 years of independent research in Cypriot and Mediterranean archaeology at the ARU since its foundation in 1991. As you have noticed already, all lectures of the series will be delivered by 13 of the ARU postdoctoral researchers to showcase their ongoing research endeavors. Our lectures are held every Monday via Zoom at 7:30 Cyprus time. They are free and open to the public, but registration is required for access before each event starts. More information about this and previous public lecture series you can find on the Archaeological Research Unit's webpage. The unit has achieved a compelling score in the QS World University Rankings by subject, ranked in the top 150 universities in archaeology in the past couple of years, attesting to the staff's excellence in teaching and research. Through the coordination of EU and state-funded innovative research projects, the participation of its members in international conferences, and the organization of research workshops and congresses in Cyprus and abroad, the ARU continues to contribute actively to the archaeology of the Mediterranean world, engage closely in relevant debates with the archaeological community overseas, and develop international networks. The unit demonstrates a highly active profile, which includes the exploration of prehistoric and historical landscapes, material culture, materials analysis, and art in Cyprus and abroad, as well as heritage studies on land and under the sea. The unit is also home to 19 promising postdoctoral researchers, rising to a total of 29 next semester, when new members will be employed in the framework of new research projects, including the ERC Starting Grant, the first in archaeology at the University of Cyprus, won by Dr. Artemis Georgiou, a new research program that officially started last June. We all at the unit work together collegially to materialize our aims and vision for the years to come, making good use of private funds, university and state resources, and investing on the young generation of undergraduate, postgraduates, and postdoctoral researchers. Here, before proceeding with introducing our first speaker today for this semester, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Professor Vasiliki Kassianidou, who is going to announce an event that the Department of History and Archaeology and the ARU are organizing this semester. Lina?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Let me share my screen first. Okay, you can see the announcement. Yes. So this year marks not only the Archaeological Research Unit's 30th birthday, but also Professor Emeritus Dimitrios Michailidis' 75th birthday. And Dimitris was the second director of the Archaeological Research Unit and the longest standing director. We owe him a lot, and we feel we have a lot to celebrate for his brilliant career and for his contribution to the archaeology of Cyprus, to the Archaeological Research Unit, to the University of Cyprus. He was one of the first professors to join the University of Cyprus. So we are organizing a conference in his honor. It's called Convivium. We chose the name Convivium is the Latin version of a symposium because it is a get-together of close friends and collaborators. It will take place from the 26th to the 28th of October. It will be on an online event, and we will also have an event by physical presence, but because of the measures, the numbers that can actually be with us in the room are limited, so that it will be by invitation only, but the rest can all follow the conference online at the link that we will share with you. Is already on the program of the Archaeological Research Unit lecture series, but we will send the program and all the information very soon. So I hope you join us for that conference as well. Thank you very much, and I wish Dora all the best for the lecture. We're all looking forward to hearing about her project. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lina. So our first speaker in this series is Theodora, or Dora Moutsiou, postdoctoral researcher at the ARU since 2015. Dora studied history and archaeology at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. She continued with her MA studies in the archaeology of human origins at the University of Southampton and received her doctoral title in 2011 in Paleolithic archaeology from Royal Holloway of the University of London. Dora did not leave the UK straight away. She worked as a conservation technician at the Natural History Museum in London until 2015, when the University of Cyprus won her. Having received a Marie Curie Individual Fellowship, she moved to Cyprus to collaborate for 2 years in the framework of her postdoctoral project Pre-Nets with our colleague Lina Kassianidou. In 2017, Dora joined Lina again and the University of Cyprus team to work for a year as a special scientist in the framework of the MedStack project at the Archaeological Research Unit until 2018, when she initiated PLACY, another postdoctoral research program funded by the Cyprus Research and Innovation Foundation and coordinated by Lina Kassianidou. What is indeed fascinating is that Dora won a very prestigious prize in 2018, the Young Researcher of the Year award in social sciences from the Cyprus Research and Innovation Foundation. It is within the framework of this award that Dora has been leading another research project with the acronym PLACE at the Archaeological Research Unit since 2019. Meanwhile, Dora also won an excellent research grant by the European Research Funds and the Research and Innovation Foundation. The project, which is still running, is titled Delineating Probable Sea Routes Between Cyprus and its Surrounding Coastal Areas at the Start of the Holocene, a simulation approach. Dora's research interests include island archaeology, island colonization, human-environment interaction, prehistoric movement, mobility and exchange through the analysis of raw material circulation and selection, the identification and excavation of Pleistocene archaeological localities in Europe, Africa, and the Mediterranean, including Greece and Cyprus. Dora has an impressive list of collaborations with other institutions and specialists in Cyprus and around the globe through her participation in numerous field projects since 2000. She worked as a field archaeologist and supervisor in Paleolithic, Neolithic, and later prehistoric sites in far north Queensland, in Australia, in Kenya, in Bulgaria, Stelida on the island of Naxos, at various sites in mainland Greece, and Agia Napa in Cyprus. Apart from the Young Researcher of the Year award, Dora has received numerous other awards and honorary stipends from the Quaternary Research Association in the UK, the British Academy, and the Arts and Humanities Research Council. Our tonight's speaker has been active in teaching too. She has delivered courses and lectures as a guest and visiting lecturer at James Cook University in Australia, at the University of Southampton in the UK, of course, and at the University of Cyprus. Moreover, she has organized or co-organized 5 scientific meetings and has been an external evaluator of journal articles and research proposals submitted in the framework of the Marie Curie Actions, the European Commission Research and Innovation Grants, and the Polish Academy of Sciences. Last but not least, Dora is first author of or co-author of 16 peer-reviewed papers published in high-ranking international journals and edited volumes, and a monograph published in 2014 with ArchaeoPress. Closing this introduction, I would like to kindly ask all our participants to now switch off their cameras and mute their microphones to avoid potential background noise and connection interruption during the lecture. Should you wish to express a question or comment to our speaker, please feel free to use the chat button on Zoom. You may also switch on your cameras after the end of the presentation to address your question directly to the speaker by raising your hand and unmuting your microphone. Dear Dora, we look forward to hearing about maritime connections in Eastern Mediterranean prehistory. Thank you very much.
Thanasi, thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you very much for your generous introduction. And I guess it is my 6th year anniversary of being at the RU. So I'm very happy I'm still amongst this great team. And for my talk today, I thought I'll present a little bit of all the work I've been doing all these 6 years. So good evening, everyone. I wish I could welcome you in person, but I guess online is fine too. So I should share my screen now. One moment. Is that okay?
Yes, Dora, we can all see it.
Okay. So for my talk today, I have chosen to discuss the role of the sea in the organization of prehistoric communities in the Eastern Mediterranean. My particular focus is on the creation and maintenance of social interactions between groups geographically separated by sea and the influence of such water gaps in the scale of prehistoric connectivity. I will begin with a brief overview of the deep history of the region and its connection with the sea, before turning my attention to Cyprus to explore its maritime links to the mainland from the terminal Pleistocene until the late Aceramic Neolithic. Traditional narratives of seascapes regard islands as isolated from the continent, too impoverished to have sustained hunter and gatherer populations, and landscapes to be conquered and tamed by technologically advanced human groups associated with a Neolithic lifestyle. This view of the sea as a barrier to human movement is particularly persistent in Eastern Mediterranean prehistory, with the colonization of the region's islands commonly regarded as a Neolithic phenomenon initiated by farming populations from the mainland under demographic or environmental pressure at the start of the Holocene. This perception is at odds with recent mounting evidence demonstrating the presence of mobile hunter-gatherer and forest groups on many of the Eastern Mediterranean islands and the surrounding mainland prior to the Holocene. Pleistocene hominins are well known from multiple localities and variable habitats around Cyprus, with examples dating as far back as the early Pleistocene, or around 2 million years ago. In Israel and Syria, for example, we have Ubidaya at 1.4 million years, Evron Quarry at about 1 million years ago, and Geser Benot Yaakov at the early Middle Pleistocene boundary at around 800,000 years ago. Middle and late Pleistocene archaeological sites ranging from 800,000 to 12,000 years ago are more frequent, with examples in Eurasia found in Turkey, Israel, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and as far south as the Arabian Peninsula. Looking to the west in mainland Greece, although early Pleistocene sites are still lacking and early Middle Pleistocene sites are very scarce, there is growing evidence for the Pleistocene human presence in the area from the late Middle Pleistocene onwards, with paleoanthropological and archaeological remains from sites across the peninsula. The recently excavated site of Marathusa I in Megalopolis in the Peloponnese places humans on the Greek mainland at around 500 to 400,000 years ago, while other sites such as Kokkinopoulos on Epirus have yielded minimum ages that place humans at the latest parts of the Middle Pleistocene, around the 200 to 150,000 mark. Late Pleistocene sites dating between 100,000 to 40,000 years ago are here also much more abundant. Archaeological sites of the Pleistocene age have also recently been documented in the Mediterranean modern-day islands of the Aegean and Ionian Seas. Sites include Middle Pleistocene Rhodaphnidia in Lesbos and the Middle-Late Pleistocene quarry site of Stelida in Naxos. Infrared stimulated luminescence dating on sediment places Rhodaphnidia in a stratigraphic sequence from around 165 to 475,000 years ago, and Stelida from approximately 13 to 200,000 years ago. Finally, surface lithic finds assigned to the Pleistocene have also been collected from islands in the Ionian, including Corfu, Lefkas, Kefalonia, and Zakynthos. Paleogeographic reconstructions of the Aegean and Ionian Seas demonstrate that few of these islands were in fact insular during the Pleistocene. For example, Lesbos would have been connected to the Asian mainland during glacial episodes, and similarly, much of the Aegean basin could have been traversed by foot when sea levels were sufficiently low to have exposed a land bridge between Anatolia and the Greek peninsula. In other instances, islands such as Kefalonia, Ithaca, and Zakynthos were separated from the mainland during episodes of marine regression, but their distance from the continental coast was only between 5 and 12 kilometers, with new islets emerged from the sea, further narrowing the straits. So, despite their significance in understanding coastal adaptations, these paleoreconstructions limit the interpretative value of these modern-day islands as evidence of maritime crossings. Nevertheless, the documentation of Pleistocene sites on the South Aegean island of Crete and its neighboring islet of Gavdos do provide strong indication for Pleistocene sea crossings in the Aegean. Crete and Gavdos, like Cyprus, have been disconnected from the mainland for several million years. Claims based on recent archaeological fieldwork put human presence on Crete as early as 130,000 years ago. On Gavdos, which was also never connected to Crete, surface lithic finds place humans on the islet at around 120,000 years ago, although this chronological attribution is based on macroscopic criteria rather than absolute dating. So, although limited, these examples demonstrate early human ability to adapt to coastal environments and, crucially, to successfully navigate the sea as early as the late Pleistocene. The technological capacity of early humans for maritime crossings is exemplified in the following period, the Mesolithic, demonstrated with an increase in hunter-gatherer occupation of several islands in the Aegean and Ionian Seas, and the first examples of human presence on Cyprus, best represented by the so far oldest securely dated site of Acroteria et Okrymnos in the south coast of the island. With the advent of the Neolithic, maritime movement and human engagement with the sea truly intensifies. At this time, the Mediterranean Sea connects insular and mainland communities via long-distance maritime interactions, raw material transports, commodities exchange, and possibly shared symbolic systems. For example, obsidian transportation between islands in the Aegean, as well as between islands and the mainland, highlights a strong dialectic amongst these Neolithic communities mediated by the sea. The distribution of Melian obsidian across the Aegean suggests that sea networks were at this point well established and the people involved in them had strong maritime affinities. The documentation of large amounts of obsidian from Milos at Kukurichi Hoyuk in the Izmir region on the western Anatolian coast highlights multi-directional maritime routes and a truly connected world. Despite clear evidence for the successful early exploitation of insular environments in the rest of the Eastern Mediterranean and other parts of the world, such as the Indo-Pacific region, as far back as 100,000 years ago, Cyprus is still persistently regarded as isolated from regional phenomena and largely unaffected by them. The main reason behind this marginality view is the island's insularity and geographic location at the periphery of the continent, separated by an approximate 70-kilometer sea gap if we consider the closest continental coastline. Moreover, a long-term presence of hunter-gatherer populations on Cyprus is debated on the grounds of presumed limited insular resources and ecological carrying capacity. Notwithstanding the fact that hunter-gatherer populations favored different ecological niches compared to subsequent permanent farming lifeways, the apparent lack of indigenous foragers narrative has been disproven by the documentation of several terminal Pleistocene archaeological sites on the island. The earliest of these sites, dated to around 12,000 years ago with a strong suit of radiocarbon determinations, is Akrotiri Aitokrimnos. Aitokrimnos is a small collapsed rock shelter with well-defined stratigraphy containing substantial faunal and cultural materials. According to the site's excavator, Alan Simmons, the artifact assemblage comprises of over 1,000 pieces of microlithic and blade or bladelet-oriented chipstone and a small number of ornaments, including picrolite beads. Faunal remains are much more abundant, comprising about 300,000 bones, the majority of which belongs to pygmy hippo, but also includes birds and over 70,000 shells. Since documentation, a small number of additional early Holocene forager sites has come to light, such as Nisi Beach and Akamas Aspros and Vretia Rudias further inland. Small collections of surface lithic finds collected during field projects from the early 1960s up to the 80s, in combination with recent field surveys, provide further support for a potential pre-Holocene exploitation of the island. Although the earliest phase of the island's prehistory is one of the least well-known, these early examples and a renewed dedicated research focus on the period bring to light new information suggesting familiarity with the sea and use of the medium in human movement in this part of the Eastern Mediterranean from at least 12,000 years ago. The start of the Holocene signifies a more constant use of the sea as a way of life. Maritime pathways were used for the transfer of pigs and other faunal and floral elements to the island. Additional species are introduced via sea routes throughout the Neolithic, while strong parallels between the Cypriot and Levantine material culture in architecture, lithic technologies, and possibly ideology suggest ongoing interactions between the two regions. The initial ceramic Neolithic sites of Aios Tichonas Klimonas and Agia Varvaras Prokremnos signal the permanent presence of people on the island. These first permanent settlements show evidence for hunting, plant cultivation, and modest consumption of marine foods dating to around 10,000 years ago, followed by settlement expansion in the Middle Holocene around 8,000 years ago. The traditional view of Cyprus regards these early settlements as the outcome of Neolithic farmers who arrived from the mainland and subsequently turned their backs to the continent, developing in isolation because of the presumed sea barriers prohibiting communication. So for the rest of my talk, I wish to concentrate on a particular component of the Cypriot archaeological record of the period to discuss how accurate this perception is. My focus is on objects made of exotic raw materials as proxies of prehistoric social interaction, long-distance exchange, and communication. In a ceramic Neolithic Cyprus, Carnelian and Obsidian are two categories of rare stone objects that provide direct material evidence for tracking long-distance maritime links with the continent. Both raw materials are non-native to Cyprus, with geological sources occurring in various locations in the Circum-Mediterranean region. Carnelian exploitation is primarily known from the Indian subcontinent and mainland Southeast Asia, namely Thailand and Cambodia. There, carnelian is extracted from mines or collected in pebble form from secondary river deposits. Near Cyprus, the precise location and quality of carnelian sources in mainland regions are not well understood. Bibliographic references suggest the occurrence of good quality carnelian sources in Cappadocia and Troy, Armenia, Egypt, and further afield in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan. Finally, Pliny mentions the existence of carnelian deposits in the South Aegean island of Paros, although this cannot be corroborated on current evidence. On the other hand, obsidian is much better studied, with outcrops in discrete regions around the world associated with Neolithic volcanic activity. In the Circum-Mediterranean region and close to Cyprus, good quality obsidian sources occur in the Aegean islands of Milos, Antiparos, and Gyali, as well as in central and southeastern Turkey and the Caucasus. Carnelian is one of the oldest known gemstones with a tradition that extends from the Neolithic to the present day in the manufacture of jewelry and seals. Carnelian enjoyed widespread popularity, especially in ancient Near East and India, where its attractive red color and brilliancy denoted the material with a high value second only to lapis lazuli. In a ceramic Neolithic Cyprus, carnelian artifacts are extremely rare and found exclusively in the form of beads, seemingly following the Near Eastern stone bead making tradition. To date, only 50 carnelian beads have been documented from a ceramic Neolithic context, island-wide, deriving from 4 different sites. The latest ceramic Neolithic site of Hirokitia Vouni has the largest assemblage. The first, albeit limited, evidence for obsidian use in Cyprus comes from the initial ceramic Neolithic and the archaeological site of Agios Tichonas Klimonas. Here, obsidian occurs in small amounts, represented with an assemblage of 3 bladelets and 1 blade. Obsidian use on the island reaches its peak during the early ceramic Neolithic. At this time, it is distributed across the island in quantities that exceed those of the preceding or following periods, even though frequencies differ among sites. Obsidian consumption on the island declines during the later ceramic Neolithic. Then, although the number of sites using obsidian does not alter significantly compared to the previous phase, the quantities in circulation considerably drop off. Typologically, obsidian artifacts exhibit a great degree of uniformity. With very few exceptions, all the obsidian assemblages discovered on Cyprus are dominated by either small blades or bladelets. To date, there is no evidence of core production on the island, and core debris is lacking in Cypriot sites dated to either early or later ceramic Neolithic. In terms of production, the obsidian stone tools found on Cyprus exhibit strong technological parallels with those of the Near East, and made via the application of pressure flaking. Combined, this information suggests that the obsidian artifacts found on Cyprus were manufactured offshore and subsequently introduced to the island in finished form. An intensive analytical program dedicated to the geochemical analysis and elemental characterization of these exotic stone objects provides crucial data on the material's provenance. The analyses were conducted with the application of X-ray fluorescence spectrometry, a method producing precise, reliable, and highly reproducible results. In addition, XRF is fast and completely non-destructive, which makes it ideal for mass sampling, allowing the analysis of entire assemblages. Through this work, it has been possible to determine the occurrence of multiple geological sources in the Cypriot archaeological assemblages. With regards to carnelian, based on the artifact's elemental values, it is possible to separate them into 2 distinct groupings. although the lack of sourcing data limits our ability to provide any associations with specific geological sources at this stage, at least. As far as Obsidian is concerned, at least 3 different sources are represented in the analyzed assemblages. The majority of the ceramic Neolithic Cypriot Obsidian artifacts are sourced to the central Anatolian volcanic complex of Golu Dag, with a lesser amount to Nenezi Dag, also in central Anatolia. Moreover, for the first time, we have concrete evidence for the presence of material from an Eastern Anatolian source, Bingol B, so far represented with 1 artifact from Silurokambos. The provenance of these exotics, various sources in the mainland, demonstrate practices associated with seafaring and close maritime interconnections between various regions of the Eastern Mediterranean. The documentation of multiple sources on Cyprus also suggests that the arrival of these exotic objects to the island was not the result of a single journey or a single network, but rather reflects multiple interaction networks between the island and the mainland, and a more constant and adept use of the sea as a communication tool. Cyprus is an oceanic island separated by open sea since the late Miocene, early Pliocene boundary about 6 million years ago. A sea gap of at least 30 to 60 kilometers will have separated Cyprus from the continental coast during episodes of marine regression. Held describes how low sea levels will have exposed part of the now submerged extension of the Cape Apostolos Andreas, the eastern side of Cyprus, in the form of a short arc of offshore islands. These, however, would not have functioned as stepping stones due to their distance from the mainland coastline. An estimated gap of at least 60 kilometers or 30 to 40 kilometers between Cyprus and Anatolia and the northern Levantine coast, respectively, existed during maximum sea level recessions at minus 120 meters. In practical terms, this means that at any stage in Eastern Mediterranean prehistory, people involved in the exchange of Carnelian, Obsidian, and likely other materials and objects who have by default relied on the sea and maritime travel to perform these exchange events. Although at this stage we cannot pinpoint exact departure points, we can consider 2 different areas as supplying exotics to Cyprus. The location of early Holocene obsidian-bearing sites along the north and south coasts of the island, and the apparent obsidian gap between the 2 regions likely support 2 different mainland routes for the introduction of obsidian to Cyprus. One from the Levant to the south coast of Cyprus, and another one from Anatolia to the north coast of Cyprus. Cyprus is the only large island in the Eastern Mediterranean, and its presence will have been obvious to anyone traveling by sea, especially from nearby Cilicia or North Syria. Their visibility will have been optimal during clear atmospheric conditions, not only from the opposite coast, but from upland locations further inland as well. Sea travel between Cyprus and the neighboring continent would not have been straightforward due to nautical elements like currents and winds, but a recent ongoing study suggests that such travel would have been possible at different times of the year and under certain weather conditions. Preliminary drift-induced simulation results indicate that there exist at least 2 periods during winter for south to north routes and during summer from east to west routes, whereby the sea state is favorable to drifting vessels, especially for shorter distances. During almost all the time, departures from the southern side of the Levantine mainland are blocked by currents flowing almost parallel to the coast. An important question this discussion raises is why will these early communities choose to get involved in the establishment and maintenance of long-distance exchange networks? Long-distance travel is risky, time and effort-consuming, and requires substantial advanced planning, especially where the sea is involved. Therefore, from a cost-effective perspective, the benefits associated with such an undertaking must outweigh these cognitive and organizational costs. Looking for and procuring food and other essential materials from the environment are not the only reasons that hunter-gatherers move around. In fact, the ethnographic and archaeological records around the globe are full of examples of people moving individually and in groups for reasons of social contact, including the establishment of new social ties or the reaffirmation of existing ones. Returning to Cyprus, the amount of obsidian and carnelian indicate that the value of these exotics lies within the realm of their social life. The obsidian quantities reaching Cyprus are too small to identify a specific lithic toolkit, and locally available good quality chert would have been equally, if not more appropriate for most day-to-day activities linked to farming. The total number of obsidian artifacts unearthed on the island is in fact so limited that it is equivalent to only 3 kilos of raw material for the entire ceramic Neolithic. If we consider Rob and Farr's estimate that 5 to 10 1 kilogram nodules of stone per year would have supplied a Neolithic village with 20 to 30 usable flakes a day, then it seems reasonable that obsidian in Cyprus was not sought for its functional properties. Moreover, items of personal ornamentation, such as the carnelian beads we see in Cypriot contexts, have been readily linked to social or ritual displays of power ever since their initial appearance in the Upper Paleolithic, when stone beads were apparently used to signify self-definition and social display. Beyond their form and function, the raw materials chosen for their production likely suggest that carnelian as a stone had a particular significance in their bearers' lives. Sophisticated information, crucial to the operation of a society, can be conveyed even through the distribution of everyday objects like stone tools. This is so because in social transactions, the value of portable resources is closely connected to the individuals who perform those actions. Along with the processes of manufacturing, handling, and transporting them, artifacts acquire agency by taking on the properties of the individuals as social actors. The materiality of the objects themselves influences their value, as well as the scale and patterns of their circulation. Objects made of materials that stand out are more efficient in creating and maintaining social relations than items that do not share distinctive physical qualities. It is hard to argue that the visual appearance of objects was always more important than, for example, their feel in the hand. Nevertheless, certain visual material qualities heighten human sensory responses because they affect the way they are perceived by the human brain, with some classes of objects attracting a lot more attention and respect than others. The ability to reflect light, color, and brilliance have been found to be aesthetically satisfying and in certain societies even spiritually charged with power. This innate attraction to objects that are colorful, sparkle, shine, or transmit light appear to elicit aesthetic and emotional responses that transcend cultural or chronological boundaries. Material objects are active agents in the maintenance of complex social relations that enable individuals to communicate without the necessity of face-to-face interaction, what we call in absentia. The selected stones' unique aesthetic properties imbued the chosen materials with a symbolic power that extended across land and sea. The symbolic role of obsidian and carnelian artifacts is linked to their ability to entangle communities and individuals in emotional bonds, either kinship or alliance relationships that can be maintained at a distance. These exotic objects function then as symbols of relatedness, a powerful symbolic medium for those early Cypriot communities' social strategies and negotiations within the changing Mediterranean Neolithic world, possibly even as a buffer against resource stress and the risks associated with frontier colonization. Unique visual attributes heighten the feeling of familiarity, belonging, and tradition associated with a locality or a landscape, rich with individual or group experiences, and accord the items with a unique value that is social. More crucially, they allow objects and their bearers to communicate this feeling of belonging even without the necessity of face-to-face interactions. Once communication is maintained in absentia, it can overcome otherwise inconceivable distances. The maintenance of social relationships between Cyprus and the wider Eastern Mediterranean should be seen as evidence of the active focus of early Holocene communities on the island to become or remain part of the wider social landscape rather than out of necessity in order to gain access to resources, animal stocks, and new technologies, as often assumed. I would argue instead that the archaeological record of early Cyprus provides evidence for an active interest on behalf of these early settlers towards a continued two-way interaction with continental communities within the broader Eastern Mediterranean social sphere. This interpretation implies that different Neolithic groups crossed to Cyprus for a variety of reasons rather than an exclusive goal of sedentary farming. The site of Agia Varvaras Prochnemnos, excavated by the late Carl McCartney, provides a clear example of intensive resource exploitation that can be viewed as the use of the island for more than just settlement during the Neolithic. According to the site's excavator, Agia Varvara functioned as a specialized site processing pigments and chipped stone for export. Another example that awaits confirmation may be seen in the exploitation of picrolite. Picrolite is soft, pale blue-green to olive-green colored metamorphic rock, the product of hydrothermal alteration of ultra-basic rocks. Locally sourced picrolite has been in use since the Epipaleolithic, as verified in Aetokremnos' small but significant assemblage of 6 picrolite objects: 1 bead, 3 pendants, and 2 small pebbles, probably pendant preforms. Greenstone is for the first time sought in the Near East in the transition to agriculture to make beads and pendants, possibly signifying associations with plant cultivation as suggested by Bar Yosef and Porat. None of the sources of these greenstones are found in the vicinity of the studied archaeological sites, raising the question whether some of the raw material might not be Cypriot picrolite. Finally, we should also consider the possibility that on Cyprus, early seafarers tapped into an additional stream of perishable resources, such as salt and seaweed, or even fish, shellfish, and marine avifauna that lay near or beyond the shore. More work is again required before we can generate concrete evidence for such exchange networks. The permanent settlement of Cyprus and the expansion of populations on the island in the late Ceramic Neolithic is represented in the archaeological record with fewer Near Eastern parallels in general, also noted in obsidian consumption. This phenomenon is often viewed as evidence for the increasing and constricting isolation of Cyprus from the broader Eastern Mediterranean social landscape. However, a broad and diverse array of material, faunal, and malacological evidence demonstrates ongoing maritime activity and indicates that the people of later ceramic Cyprus had not only adapted to a new insular way of life, but also maintained some level of overseas contacts with people in coastal Levant. Not only do exotic materials like obsidian not only do exotic materials, obsidian and carnelian, have a continuing presence in the Cypriot material culture of the period. But can I continue? But also other classes of objects reflect similar patterns of consumption with the Levantine mainland. Characteristic examples are incised or decorated dentalium cells, primarily associated with burials, or engraved pebbles as seen in Hirokitian orthos. These objects demonstrate continuing maritime contacts with the continent and perhaps even a shared symbolic or referential world. Throughout the ceramic Neolithic of Cyprus, Near Eastern-based populations were actively engaged in transferring to the island people, livestock, crops, exotic artifacts, and other goods. Similarly, populations already on the island were exporting locally available resources to the continent, either directly or indirectly. Seafaring increased the range of foragers and expanded their contact with other lands and peoples. Their involvement in the coastal domain enabled them to expand their habitats, giving them access to new resources, material and social, which ultimately led to the creation of a regional maritime interaction sphere. The Mediterranean Sea, far from being an obstacle to these interactions, was in fact a means of connecting people in the exchange of objects, ideas, and genes. The early Holocene is a time when big changes occur in the broader Mediterranean region with the development of a suite of Neolithic features. Within this framework, Cyprus has been regarded as a marginal and isolated region, colonized in one major diffusion event by farmers colonizers from the Near East. Recent discoveries of early sites on the island dispute such claims and suggest instead that early Holocene Cyprus was undergoing a process of gradual change that included shifts not only in subsistence and technology, but also in social organization and interaction. The Mediterranean Sea facilitated these interactions, serving as a highway to communication, enabling communities to entangle themselves in a web of social relationships that extended across the sea. The movement of people is fundamental to human society. Traditionally, the human ability to successfully move and adapt to a diversity of environments has been seen as a recent behavioral phenomenon in human evolution. However, growing archaeological and environmental datasets from around the globe demonstrate that this ecological plasticity is an innate human characteristic. High-altitude regions, deserts, tropical forests, and islands have been regarded as impassable environments prior to the terminal Pleistocene or early Holocene and the development of cognitive and technological advances, presumably exclusively associated with Neolithic farmers. Current evidence disputes such narratives and highlights the unique human plasticity to disperse and adapt to a diverse range of habitats, including islands, earlier than commonly assumed and clearly linked to pre-farming communities. Recent studies, in fact, show that increased access to resources is a strong impetus to a rapid expansion to new territories, contra hypothesis of environmental and demographic stress as primary factors behind human movement. Considering that the continental regions of the Eastern Mediterranean were populated by late Pleistocene hunter-gatherer groups adapted to coastal living and maritime travel, the island of Cyprus is uniquely positioned in contributing new data to an archaeological research theme of global interest. Thank you very much. I think I'm done.
Wonderful. It seems that apart from our specialized adult audience, we have very young fans in our lecture tonight. So congratulations, Theodora. Thank you very much for this richly illustrated and stimulating presentation. Indeed, I am sure that this was only a sample of your multifaceted research and touching upon issues, fascinating issues such as and phenomena in early prehistory such as connectivity, marginality, adaptive strategies. What else was there? That's a sensory aspect of raw materials and exotica. I personally very much admire the way that specialists in early prehistory work, collecting the data, evaluating, contextualizing, interpreting, and or theorizing. That was amazing work. Thank you very much. And let me now give the floor to our audience. Let's check if there